Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome everyone to the Find Your Leadership Confidence. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. And our goal of our podcast is to empower you with guests and topics that will make you take your business to the next level. And today I am so excited to have Baird on my interview today, my podcast today. And he and I both understand the importance of leadership with your heart. And so today's theme is really, as you see on the screen, doing business at the speed of heart. Brian, thank you so much for being a guest. I cannot wait to learn a little bit more about you and have our guests learn about you. So why don't you take some time to give them some background about who is Baird and what does he bring to his audience?
Well, let's start with the fact that he's not a perfectionist, but he is a curator of experience. And I have a green halo here because something's not quite right with the lighting or something here. So let's just let everybody know I don't have the halo's not real. It's not.
Angel Brian.
I do have headphones on, and the green is just my green screen kind of doing some weird thing here. So I just talk about myself.
But no, let's have some background as to how did you get started? You have trademarked there two things, the effective way and the doing business at the speed of heart. Yeah. For the effective way, where did that come from? And tell us a little bit about how people can do things the effective way, Mr. Perfectionist.
Well, my journey to the effective way was several decades of entrepreneurial energy. I've started, operated, sold and lost businesses along the way, many businesses. Yeah. And some of the reasons for moving a business out of just a side note, some of the reasons for letting a business go was boredom. Like, kind of did what I needed to do, and then somebody else should take care of that. Sometimes I would hire somebody to run the business and I would move on to something else, but ultimately that person their passion was to run the business and mine was to create. So part of the challenge with entrepreneurs is how to maintain that creation, birthing energy that is so much a part of why they do those things. But putting that in perspective is that over the years, over the decades of doing what I've been doing, I found a huge passion for helping other people birth their babies of business and so to speak, and even helping them become better versions of themselves in the process. Because having gone through much of that my own self is having to learn, sometimes without consultation of others, which may be the most challenging way to learn something about yourself on your own, and then have that become such a profound part of your journey in guiding others and theirs that you can actually give them more efficiencies in the process because you've been there and done that and they can learn from you. So excuse me. So the effective way is just kind of a summation of the idea that business as usual, and in my observation, the business as usual has been dying for a long time. But I was very heavily involved in as a director of sales for a company where I had a lot of room to use my entrepreneurial energies, and things started to change in that company in ways that I egregiously disagreed with. And I was there 10 years working for a company, which was kind of outside the norm for me. I've always had that do it on my own type of thing.
Right.
It was a great experience in the end because I learned a great deal about what makes people think business works.
Mm-hmm.
So, the thing that I disagreed with was, as a director of sales, I'm being told to teach my people, make 500 phone calls a month, set 100 appointments, or whatever the case may be. And when you take the institution of your business and turn it into metrics, everybody becomes a robot. And that's okay. They can find ways to be creative inside of this process, but it no longer becomes about people. It becomes about the business. It becomes about the money. And I was already in the process of learning a great deal about my approach to sales. And I had even formulated this philosophy during my tenure, and that 10 years, was that if you did not conduct your sales with an energy or a posture of love and concern and caring and kindness about the person you're selling to, you neither deserve the sale and nor the credit or the income that goes with that. It really had a lot to do with the fact that it's no longer an act of service, which was a posture I was learning on my own in many ways, but it became an act of self-service to show up for yourself and make sure you're doing, proverbial ring the bell in sales is all about you getting paid and all about you getting the sale and all about you getting the recognition. And in the end, it should be what's important to the person you're selling to or the organization you're selling to.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time mulling that over to the point where I was no longer happy being at the company because they were adding this set of metric-driven behavior, which made it all about the money. There was no other way to look at it. And I understood at a logical level what those pressures were, because the company had been on a very, very slow growth path. And there were people who wanted faster return on investment. Those people had put either investment into the company or stockholders. So maybe it's worth mentioning is that capitalism, as it evolved through the 1700s, was really about serving people. It may have been said in different ways, but it was really about how can we work with people so that we create the money flow that we want, but at the same time we have to recognize that it's about people to do that. And there were times in recent periods where there were economists and other people who showed up and said, no, it's just a machine. Just treat it like a machine and do this. And now we have companies who cannot make any long-term decisions because shareholders want immediate value. And people also are like, and so they get rewarded accordingly. Give me immediate value, and you get a huge parachute when you're ready to leave. A golden parachute.
Yeah.
So this kind of short-term thinking makes it all about the money. It doesn't take into consideration anybody that's a human being in the process, except the people who are finessing that shareholder value. They get completely different level of support and respect from the financial community. But you have a bad month, and you go, what we'll do is we'll close the gap on the bad month on our numbers by laying off 50,000 people, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And this kind of thinking just not only does it grate on my nerves, it's just plainly wrong. And you'll look at companies. In fact, Patagonia is recently announced that they're taking their entire net worth, including the net worth of the founder, and they're going to apply it towards social causes, which are in the billions. Yeah. And because they developed a company with social responsibility and perspective. And they built a company based on a public benefits corporation or a B Corp type status, so that they can't have shareholder value drive the short-term thinking that they would need for their return on investment. So you could buy Patagonia stock, but you can't dominate thoughts on how that company operates. So the effective way is something that the phrase just came to me, back in 2010, as a way of looking at business, not as business as usual, but in a win-win-win, zero-sum game not included. Zero-sum game goes away, that everybody can win by virtue of bringing in the human energy and the human value to the discussion, where everybody is valuable, including vendors and customers and things like that. So everybody gets something from whatever it is, a transaction or whatever the case may be. And it turns out businesses, using Patagonia as an example, that do business this way actually do better than businesses that think short-term, zero-sum game, winner take all. Is that a short answer? Was that a short answer?
We went across the ocean and back. That's excellent. And I do know that company. I know somebody that works for them for many years, and I've been always impressed with what they're doing.
Yep. If you ever want to look at some really wacky, cool quarterly financials, look at Patagonia's. They have a conventional filing because that's the way they have to file with the with the SEC and so on. But they have a fun one, so that you as an average consumer can just open up the report and see how the company is working and what they're doing with their money and how their profitability is going, and they just keep on climbing and climbing and climbing because they've developed to this posture that human beings at every level are important to how that organization works. And they also, the vision of that company was being shared properly with the entire team, instead of just executing on metrics and having some sort of vision about how the company is supposed to be run. So it's very, very beautiful way to do things. And I would say anybody who thinks money first is now shortchanging themselves.
Right. So I have so many questions, but
Let's see if I can keep the answers short.
One of the things that you said that really sparked my thought process is business not as usual is dying. So if business as usual is dying, what advice do you give to the entrepreneur, the startup, small business owner that wants to get it right?
Well, first thing is take a look around and believe business as usual is dying. Don't fall into the trap that when you get scared, you're going to go do what everybody else has done. Because right now we're in the middle of the Great Resignation is a term that's been out there, and quiet quitting is another term that's out there. There's a whole host of these things are going on, and what it really is there is a rebellion in what would be popularly the labor force. But that labor force is not just blue collar or worker bee. There are all kinds of people who because of COVID, they had a chance to kick back and go, excuse me, what's important to me?
Yeah.
What's important in how I can move through life and feel better about my journey rather than just working for a paycheck. And so this is an indication of that reality. So just believe it. It's there. Anybody who works against this is working against their own interest. Short-term thinking is in essence a way to break things up in a non-positive way, to break things so they don't work for you. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're a business owner who's seeing some of these challenges and wants to turn things around, or you're a solopreneur, somebody who works with themselves, for themselves, by themselves, just recognize that if you are turning into a short-term thinker, maybe you're acting like a hunter, where you're dependent on the next deal in order for you to even put food on the table, and you're not approaching that with the intention of service of others, but an intention of making sure you're serving yourself, people are smelling this. They're feeling this energy. They don't want to work for it. They don't want to be sold by it. They don't want to be treated under it. And this is the reason for doing it. So how do they go about establishing that process in the beginning for themselves? Has everything to do with first setting intention. My business I'm establishing or whatever I'm creating here, the prime mission of that company is to serve. And then money as a healthy byproduct should be an acceptable add-on or vector to attach to the mission, but it should not be money first thinking anymore. It does not work.
So the other thing that you talked about, which I completely agree with, I saw this in the companies that I've worked for, is that people forget that your greatest asset to your organization, whether it's one person or thousands of people, are the people. So how else can we get better at setting up success and putting our people first?
Well, it depends on the size of the company. Let's say it's a big company. So I have little prospect for this happening, but let's just say we're a big wireless phone company. And instead of treating everything as a disposable element in your business, you work on building out a strategy in your organization that has shareholder buy-in, which may require finding a way to change the corporate structure a little bit to make this happen. Get out of the short-term thinking process, because if your way to make it so you're preserving shareholder value is to terminate 50,000 people, then there's no respect for the human condition, no respect for human beings, and that should be that's a big indication as to why people don't want to do that anymore. Those companies are going to have more and more trouble, as I'm going to call it the real estate of employment. More and more people are going to find things where they can feel like they're making a difference and they're doing things. It's going to be very much more challenging for those companies to get resources that are going to support their initiatives. So I think I may have lost sight of the question, but
how do we ensure that we are having people be our greatest asset, that we are building our business, that our success is really tailored to that?
Value each other. Set the intention. Look, if the company has absolutely no money, you can't pay anybody.
Right.
I get that. So there may be a stark reality, but and I should say is that you'll find that probably won't happen in a win-win-win scenario, because I remember this moment when I had one of the company I just mentioned before, where I had been for that 10-year stint. We were doing, I was given the responsibility to make a phone call and lay 3 people in my team off.
That's the worst call.
So I sent a message to the president of the company, who's also the CEO. And I said, why don't we work on preserving everybody and we take a pay cut? It was not going to be a convenient thing, but I think energetically it would be better for the company. And so indeed, that's what we ended up doing. Is we ended up taking 10% off of the pay, only from people who were more in the executive range, because they weren't going to penalize somebody who might be working for $50,000 a year to get 45 now. Especially a lot of employees were California based, and even 50 doesn't go that far. So that's what we did. And and in the end, the company figured out that one of the things they could have done was to say, since we took that pay away, your reward for that sacrifice is we'll give you stock options that you can use to fill in later on for the future. So there are win-win-win scenarios that you can put together for people if you think outside of the box of the conventional, we need to trim costs because otherwise we're not going to meet our projections. So trim your costs this way. And it worked. It really did work.
Be creative.
So it's a scenario. It, I don't know how, for all I know, people talked badly about me behind the scenes, like, we should have just let those people go. Why am I taking a 10%? But it actually cost me quite, a couple of tens of thousands of dollars to do that. And it was worth it to me to be able to go to sleep at night, because I didn't make the phone call and lay those 3 people to, especially since one of them said, I think they're going to lay me off because I can feel we're not having the quota we're supposed to have. And I said, I personally won't lay you off because you're a valuable team member. So I had a lot of interest in preserving that relationship the way it was. So
along those lines, we talked about being focused more on the KPIs, the metrics, and that's a great way to forget about the people.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I found always to help me as I was supporting a group or a team was whenever I had managers and directors tell me what the mission was, what the value was of what I was doing, and how it played into the results. There's so many people that are out there that do their job and they have no idea how it impacts the bottom line or the success of the company. Mm-hmm. How can we avoid that going forward?
Well, there's a popularly misused phrase called employee engagement. I say misused because very often, if not almost always, is that it really becomes about what do we need to do to get employees or team members to comply with our vision?
Yeah.
And they do studies and some bring in consultants and the focus should be on sharing the vision, getting buy-in on that vision, and a healthy buy-in. And the only way to do that is to actually get your vision set in such a clear way that everybody does understand what their role is in making that vision happen. The thing is that the vision has to be human oriented, because if it's all about increasing the company's profits, employees aren't going to buy in. They've stopped working on baking the company's books, and then they start thinking about what can we do to make a world a better place. And it's becoming more and more prominent in behavior. Now, there are fear-based mentalities and thinking that takes place even in the workforce. And there are people who will they will stab you in the back, so to speak, to preserve their job and their paycheck, even though they hate their job, because they need to put food on the table the way they think their responsibilities are measured. And ultimately it doesn't have to be, none of that has to be the case. The company, and you asked the question in more details, give it a little more detail now, is that going back to what the intention is everybody has value. If they didn't have value, they shouldn't have been brought into the organization to begin with. So if you took the time to bring somebody in, they have value. And by the way, the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM as it's popularly called, has done tremendous number of studies about what it takes to replace somebody, company. Someplace between 3 to 5 times the cost of that employee with benefits included, the burden cost of that employee to replace them. And if you send 50,000 people off the books today, I'm just using a big company perspective, but if you lay anybody off for cost containment reasons today, it'll cost you more later.
Yeah.
So there has to be a different kind of thinking about what are we doing to make sure that how we're serving here is making it so that everybody has a winning proposition. You have to share the vision of what winning looks like. In fact, I'd like to be very careful with the word winning, because it makes it sound like that's what it's all about. What it's really about is that thriving. And I'd like to even use that language, is that a thriving business only exists when the business stops trying to survive. I should say it can only exist when a business stops trying to survive. There's no way to be in survival mode and thriving mode at the same time. It's just not possible. So a company that lays people off, or a company that has to rig the game to make business happen, or a company that expects employees to just be cogs in a machine, or a company where leadership is uncertain about their footing. All of those things, those become survival mode aspects of how a company works. And once you're in survival, it's no longer about thriving, and thriving is where money is. So for those people who won't even include money in the dialogue, build this heart-centered operation, get everybody involved in that heart-centered posture, get everybody buying into it, and anybody who comes on needs to be there. Is it possible that somebody can't become heart-centered? Sure. Give them a chance though, train them. You know, if you're going to make this kind of conversion, train them, give everybody an opportunity to understand what this is. And if even people who in the beginning can't seem to fit in, many of them will come around when they see everybody else coming around. Right. Because very often it's their fear that makes them show up the way they do, and they just need to be shown how they can be taking fear off the table. So it's all about the intention where everybody is valued, and the message for what that value looks like has to be clearly communicated.
So that makes me think about the piece of that, to me, that's important is the recognition that you give to those people for their efforts, those employees. Even, you know, if you only have two people, you and your partner, how are you recognizing your wins, but also just the effort and the time that you took to make that business a success?
Yeah, it's more of a comment than a question, right? So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, but what in this world today, I think everybody is struggling with the fact that, you know, with remote workers, how do we recognize, how do we motivate those workers? And I guess maybe that's where leading with your heart is going to be helpful to guide you. But.
Yeah, and it's also about what they're being recognized for, right? So there's some challenges in the idea of recognizing people for doing things that were baked into their job description. But putting that aside is the recognition, as long as somebody doesn't have other high friction points. If I'm not getting paid that well, recognition with money can be very powerful because it can change my life.
Right.
But let's just say I'm at a point where I'm more comfortable as somebody in a company's corporate profile. My money is getting me by or getting me what I need. I can go home and have a happy home life and so on. So then that's when recognition outside of money becomes even much more prevalent. I would argue both. Like if you really want to recognize somebody, they're not necessarily motivated by money, but they're grateful for the recognition that money can be part of. You know, so you can give them a plaque, but money is a pretty good way of showing that they're getting a piece of what everybody is doing in terms of a thriving company that's serving the human race.
And I think true that the whole building of a relationship is important, because then that helps you understand that person, to know individually what motivates them, what recognition would be important or meaningful to them. And it can't, you know, managers and directors and employers today can't be, well, I hired this person and, you know, at their 10-year anniversary, I don't know anything more than the day I hired them. I mean, there's got to be some time invested to get to know your people, I would think.
Yeah, and also team members learning about team members, and team members even being involved in the hiring process. There's a really good example of what I consider heart-centered energy. It turns out in Spain, there's a company called Mondragon, and it's actually a democratic operated company. The people who are the essence of the company, team members, hire the supervisors.
Nice.
So what does that really look like? Like, what does that really sound like? And can that kind of company be profitable? Well, it's actually an extremely large conglomerate. It's extremely successful, and everybody who works for that company just loves, well, I don't know, there could be exceptions, but let's just say everybody, in quotes, for that company loves being there because they get to be part of the process. They get to be involved in the shaping of the company from the very moment they show up or even get up in the morning, perhaps. And they are just part of something that's earth-shakingly different and exciting and valuable for everybody involved. And can you imagine if the world operated this way, where we got to, well, supposedly we do elect the people who are supposed to serve us, but imagine if that was really the truth.
I know.
It wasn't corporate and metrics driven.
For sure. The whole point of us getting to know our people is that, whenever you understand your folks, you know more about, you don't feel terrible about asking them to do more, because they understand what more will do for the vision, the goal, and ultimately for them. Because if the company grows, then they can grow with the company. But
Right.
if you're just, as you say, this is just about numbers, then that, to me, that company is always going to be in struggle and always going to be looking for new people to fill a slot.
And I think also, if I'm an employee of a company where you had mentioned it, like, just say my role may be more on the support side or administrative side of things, I may not understand my relationship to those numbers. So if the company's numbers driven, there's not a whole lot you can do to educate me in terms of what I'm doing is making a difference. And most people are not purely money driven. There are going to be exceptions in society, but most people are not purely money driven. So that kind of company already has a health problem, and people will smell it. I may have no choice because it's the only job I got, or whatever the case may be, but their energy will change too. They'll feel imprisoned and resentful, and and that just shakes up everything in the energy of the company. So if you want thriving, you have to get everybody. A company has no choice but to include the value of all people in the process in a compassionate, considerate, meaningful way, as opposed to, well, I want to see them as something other than a human being, but they're going to cost me $150,000 to be on the books. I have to add that to the calculations of how things are going to work out. And then already I just switch things around. It's good to know that somebody has I won't use the word cost, but has an impact on the bottom line of the company. And I would also argue that the reason why they're there is because there's a greater benefit to humanity on the other side of that discussion.
So if you were looking to hire a team, what qualities would you be looking for, and how much would you look at that resume?
Well, the resume just determines what kind of training you need to provide, in my opinion.
That's right.
Because anybody can grow into any position.
Right.
So you could, with some limitations. Maybe if you need somebody with physics background and they're just a high school graduate, we got a little bit of an education challenge. But ultimately, it's going to boil down to is how do they engage as a person with other people. And to give you an example of something that it kind of grates on my nerves when I hear the story, but it had an interesting thought, which was when somebody went to work for this company, they were offered a cup of coffee. And it could have been the best meeting ever. But if they did not offer to take that coffee cup back to the kitchen before they left the interview, they were never going to be considered for anything in that company again. Because they were looking for somebody who had enough awareness of their impact around them that they were going to just say, if that person was thoughtless enough to just leave the coffee cup on the interviewer's desk, then then that might be the way they treat a lot of other people. What it's unfortunate is I don't think it takes consideration that some people, when they're very nervous, might not be fully themselves.
Yeah, true.
So,
Very true.
And I thought about the answer to that question. I tend, in my sort of leaning in on how I can be of help to the people who are around me, is to say, what should I do with the cup? Is it possible that if I was doing an interview for a company and it was a lot riding on it, and I was very excited about this, and things were going great, and I was even getting more excited, and I was just, I got to tell my wife or whatever the stories I got with me, and I'll just leave it there and go. And now all of a sudden,
not even realize
there was a fly in the ointment in the process. So the reason why I bring that up, though, is that it kind of speaks to the idea is how do we measure quality human interaction? It's really non-trivial. Yet that's what we're really looking for, is how do people show up with the ability to create meaningful impact that benefits everybody, and then the impact that others are doing benefit them. How do we measure that? And I'm not sure it's completely measurable, yet it comes out in the conversations. So using what I'm going to call is the intention. So we value everybody. We have an impact by virtue of how we show up compassionately and considerately and kindly. And then we also have to have a certain amount of, I won't use the word work ethic, but we have a certain amount of commitment that we are going to be part of this process, and that it's not just a paycheck.
Yeah.
So not the same thing is, I don't want somebody who's coming just for a paycheck any more than they want to come to only get a paycheck.
When I used to interview, I loved to talk to them about what volunteering they did, just for that reason, because I know from, my own experience, that I found that I volunteered quite a lot, and I would do a lot of things. I learned a lot from the volunteering, but I never expected a paycheck because I was volunteering. And I thought, well, if you are willing to do hard work for no money, just think how much you'll do for me for money. And I love to hear their feelings about, the volunteering, what they got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the time we have allotted here. We can only kind of gloss over this thing in some ways, but the idea is, it really gets, if you want to just sum it all up, it kind of goes down to is, what's leadership intention? How does that message get conveyed? What is, is it healthy to begin with before it's conveyed? And then how do they convey that with sincerity and authenticity? How do they get that communication done so that's properly received? How do the people who receive it acknowledge it and buy into it? If they don't, is the message broken? Is the vision broken?
Yeah.
If they do buy it, if they don't buy in, was it not communicated thoroughly? If they still don't buy in, is it because they can't fit? There's a lot in the equation here that's going to be figured out. But ultimately, there is no single magic pill for making this happen, other than making sure that the intention of everybody showing up is to serve.
Right. It's time for rapid fire.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm just going to give you a word or phrase that I've captured, and just a real quick recap as to what your thoughts are. So, social conscience.
Oh, you're asking me
real
a
quick,
rapid answer.
Real quick, not the, across the ocean.
Social conscience is essential.
Essential, accurate. Birthing their babies. What is your best story of one of the times where you birthed a baby here? One of your projects, one of your companies.
At a time when Wall Street was completely a mess and everything like that, I started a computer consulting company. This is a few decades ago now. Wall Street was in deep trouble. People were being laid off on Wall Street left and right. And I birthed that baby during that crisis.
That's taking risk out the window.
Yep. And I ran it successfully before I merged it with another company, and then I left.
Awesome.
So.
The importance of being a servant leader.
There is no other way.
Yeah. So how do you pivot if you're not a win-win-win situation?
Take stock that you're willing to do it, believe that it needs to be done. If you're unsure how to do it yourself, get the resources who can show you the way, and then commit, take massive action.
Well, that was my next one. How important is it to just take action and be persistent?
Well, action by itself may not be enough, because you might have to have, there has to be commitment with that action, and there has to be the proper decision to feed that commitment and action. But action is once whatever the decision and commitments are, action is the deliverable. So it's the way to get it done.
Awesome. Well, I know that we could talk for hours and hours on this subject and many others, but I think it's time for us to have you just share, how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn how to do the effective way or learn how to do business at the speed of heart? What's your website?
Well, theeffectiveway.com. But I would actually encourage people to go ahead and go to Brian K. Baird, my middle initial K, and I'll just say .now.site, although I will eventually take a domain that I've just not properly used to get it to point to all that. And just there's multiple ways to connect with me there. Telegram, WhatsApp, Facebook.
Oh yeah,
email,
Telegram. I just started
phone
that.
number. Yeah.
So great to have some time with you today to talk about a subject that I believe so much in, that, you know, we have to have leaders that are leading with heart. And I love the win-win-win piece. It's a hard thing to do sometimes, but, you know, worth every minute when you get it right.
100% true.
Yep. So as I always end, life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.